These are gifts that your EURL can offer you all year round, every year, provided that you are declaring company tax and not income tax. Let's remember that company tax is charged at 15% on your first 42,500 euros of profit and 25% thereafter. So the more we can find in the way of expenses, the less we're going to have to pay in tax. But when we say more expenses, what we don't do is buy a whole load of stupid stuff that we wouldn't have bought otherwise. We want to find expenses that legitimately bring the money our way, but what we don't want to do is take it all as remuneration or salary if you prefer, because all remuneration is subject to social charges and income tax. What you'll actually end up with is a lot less. This is the first little gift that our company is going to give us, and they are notes de frais. And there are 3 times in the lifetime of a company when you might use notes de frais. The first time is before your company is even created. You will have spent money on the creation of your company, and you will have the invoices made out to yourself. You may have consulted a business consultant. You will have maybe produced a website or some marketing materials. You keep the invoices. When your company actually does exist, then you will put those in as a note de frais and you will reimburse yourself for that cost. The second time is at the point of creation. You already possess quite a lot of things that you are going to put at the company's disposition, and if you didn't do that, then the company would have to buy them. You have a computer, a telephone, a digital camera. You may have bought certain software. You have a whole office set up, a desk, a chair, shelves, stationery, a waste paper basket. If you're a tradesperson, you will definitely have tools, all of those things. You itemize them, you put a reasonable second-hand price on them, and you put them in as a note de frais, and the company will reimburse you. And the third time is after your company already exists. So these are the obvious things, like if you go to see a client, you have to pay the péage on the motorway, that's a note de frais. If you're away from home and you have to have lunch out, that's a note de frais. One that may be the most advantageous to you. If your company is registered at your home address, if you work out of your spare room, then you are putting that space at your company's disposition and you can rent it out. I would suggest an all-inclusive price, something like 250 euros a month seems perfectly reasonable to me, and that's going to give you 3,000 euros a year, which you can reimburse yourself directly with a note de frais. And that office rental is the only part that's actually taxable. What you have to be careful of is that it doesn't push you up into a higher tax bracket, and you might just have to adjust your salary downward to allow for that. Indemnité kilométrique. You can only claim these if you are using a vehicle where the carte grise is in your name, or if it's in your partner's name, wife, husband, paxed partner. Anything else won't do. I've heard a lot of people talking about the possibility of leasing. There is an argument for that. We can do a separate video about it. But I personally think that at a certain point, indemnités kilométriques are extremely advantageous. This is the table for this year, and what you'll see is if you are in this between 5,000 and 20,000 kilometers, then this can work out really well for you. Say you do 10,000 kilometers, this is the rate that they give you. Add the 1,395, that gives you nearly 5,000 euros. And if you have one of these, a compte courant remboursement, certain accounting packages do have them. You need to speak with your accountant about it. You can just transfer the money directly from your professional account to your personal account, and it's in your pocket without charges and without income tax. Remuneration or salary. Well, obviously your company is supposed to pay you, right? So that's not much of a gift. And yes, it is one of the ways that your company can pay you. I'd like you to see how it works from the point of view of the company. So for you to have net in your pocket 100 euros, you'll know that that 100 is subject to about 47% social charges. There they are. If you are a company that's declaring company tax at 15%, then 15% of 147 is 22 euros. And if you're declaring at 25%, then 25% of 147 is 37 euros. So what that does is it lowers your tax liability by these amounts, so that the real cost to the company, if you're declaring at 15%, only 125, and if you're declaring company tax at 25%, then the real cost to the company is only 110. Dividends. So this is what people tend to think of first when they imagine alternative ways of paying themselves. But what I'll tell you straight off the bat is that the EURL or the SARL, same thing, they're not the best setup if you want to pay yourself a lot of dividends. If you want to pay yourself a lot of dividends, then you will be much better off with an SAS or a CESU. And obviously that's a whole different video. But with an EURL or an SARL, you will limit yourself to 10% of your capital. So if you started off your company with 1,000 euros of capital, then the maximum you can take in dividends is 100 euros, not very much. And on that 100 euros, you will be taxed. You do have the choice. You can pay the flat tax of 30%, or you can pay CSG at 17.2% and then income tax on 60% of the amount you take in dividends. But either way, I think you can see that you're not going to be left with very much. The reason why you won't take more than 10% of capital, it's not that you're not allowed to, but if you do, then they will add social charges to it because they'll see it as like a kind of dissimulated way of taking a salary. We're going to treat it as a salary and we're going to put social charges on it. But now we come to this, the trio bancaire, the gift that keeps on giving. And you'll see why I love this so much. First of all, for any of these, you do need to have at least one employee. And if that frightens you, if you think that employees will cost you a huge amount of money in social charges, I can assure you it does not have to be the case. And if that employee happens to be your wife or your husband, then this is even better. So the first in our trio is the Plan Épargne Entreprise, which of course is difficult not to call. The P is basically a savings plan. Your company sets it up, you can do it with the bank, you can do it with your insurer. It will cost you a small amount of money to maintain the plan, and that's obviously a business expense, and so far, so classic, so nothing special. Why it becomes wonderful is when you add the abondement. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that for every amount of money that you put into the savings plan, the company will also put money into the savings account for you. And not just the same amount of money, it is possible to multiply by 3. So if, for example, I put 1,000 euros into the plan, then the company can put 3,000 euros into the plan. And you employ your wife or your husband, then your wife or your husband can also put 1,000 euros into the plan, and the company can put 3,000 euros into the plan. So for the price of 2,000 euros, you now have 8,000 euros in the plan. You are supposed to block this money for 5 years. Is there any way of getting it out earlier? Yes, there is. If you get married, if you have a child, if you decide to build your own house, there are several possibilities for taking the money out without any penalty at all. When you do take it out, there are no social charges and there is no income tax. There is obviously CSG, we never get away from that. So 17% of CSG, but other than that, absolutely charge-free. And now we're going to talk about intéressement, which you will recognize as a performance-related bonus. So you could say, for example, if we go over 100,000, we will allow every employee in bonus. And it could be 1,000 euros, it could be 5,000 euros. It just depends what you have the envelope to spread out. And what can you do with that intéressement? Well, you can take it directly for yourself, in which case there are no social charges, although it will be taxed. Or you could put it on your plan. And if you do that, then you can multiply by 3 on the way. So that's super cool. And the PERCO is something very similar, except that this is a plan for your retirement. So you put the money away, and up to a certain threshold, all monies that you put into this plan are deductible from your income tax each year. So you put it away, and when you take it out of your PERCO, when you actually retire, no social charges, there will be CSG, and there will be income tax. However, by that time, you won't be working anymore, so you won't have any more income. Your income tax rate will be much, much lower. And I have one more thing to show you, which I call the cherry on the cake, and these are the CESU Préfinancés. So CESU Préfinancés, you can order directly from URSSAF. You can have up to a maximum of €2,301 per person. If you have no employees, you can give this to yourself. If you employ your wife or your husband, then they are also entitled to the same amount. So €4,602, which is basically cash in hand. You would have to have earned over €7,000 to actually be left with that amount of money. How can you spend them? You can spend these on people who will come to clean your house, do your ironing, maintain your garden, look after your pool, give your children any out-of-school tutoring. There are many possibilities, and I can put a link down in the description, but this is just a super present from your company to you.